Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your partnership with R.A. Salvatore. So that's your debut young adult novel, yeah.
That
Uh,
was my debut YA. Yeah.
so how do you get partnered up with a giant like that right first at bat?
Well, I was very fortunate. It goes back to my TV days. I was working at a production company called Fireworks, and we had decided we were going to option the Forgotten Realms. And for listeners who don't know what that is, it's the world where Dungeons and Dragons is played. There's been a gazillion novels written by it, and Bob is um, with the Dritz character, and back starting with Homeland, is just a legendary author in that world, and obviously Demon Wars, and he's got a bunch of many more books now. But back then, I was just coming up the ladder. I was a manager, and I was like, we have to get Forgotten Realms. And somehow we managed to negotiate a license for it. And so as we were developing what I wanted to do as a TV series, which it's a long story. This is the world of development in television, is so hard. But I went to Gen Con with Hasbro and met a lot of the authors, and because I knew I wanted to work with one who to develop the show, so that we isolated a little part of the realms that hadn't been worked on yet, and it was going to be like this whole thing. And I loved Bob's writing so much. I was like, I really want to work with him. So we worked with him on that project. And then afterwards, we just kept in touch. And over the years, and with his wife, Diane, we just sort of knew each other. And Bob would read some of my early drafts of stuff and tell me whether it was terrible or not. He was very much a mentor for me. And then he was approached by Temple Hill, which is a production company out here, to write a YA novel. And he had never really worked in the younger space, even though some of the books have younger folks in them. He had never worked in that. And so he was like, well, I can I get somebody who's going to do it with me. So that's how he and I ended up partnering up on The Color of Dragons. It's a deal, a partnership with Temple Hill that they then took to HarperCollins and sold. So that's how I ended up writing that book with him.
Well, you know what, the Lord of the Rings TV show looks fine. I hope it's great. But where is my Dark Elf trilogy movie?
I know. I think Bob would say the same thing. I don't know. I'm not allowed to talk about things, and I have heard some rumors, but well, it's always the rumors, and then they never happen. And so, yeah, hopefully soon, because that would be, I'm agreeing with you. It was funny because the Lord of the Rings movies had just come out, and that's why I was like, oh, we have to go make this now, back then. But yeah, it didn't. It's a long story, but we didn't end up making the show.
I think a long television series would work just fantastic for that series.
It would have been, and especially now, I actually think a lot of these novel-based series are better off in limited series or in television series, whatever we want to call them these days, streaming series. I think movies, trying to squeeze all that stuff in a 2-hour movie is really kind of hard.
Its genre just goes on forever.
Exactly.
You could have multiple. It could be the next Doctor Who. You could have all sorts of.
It could go on forever. Exactly.
How does this get started? Does he offer like, hey, are you writing something? Can I read your work? How do you get critiqued from R.A. Salvatore?
Oh, you mean, well, we wrote that together. We sat down. He has a home out here. He's usually back east in Massachusetts, but he also has a home out here. And so when he was out here, we sat down. They gave us a treatment that they sort of wanted us to work with a little bit, and then we sort of rewrote that and put our own stamp on it. And I would write something, and he would edit it up, and vice versa. And then when it came to writing the book, we would take we were both on deadline, I was working on Kelcie Murphy, and he was working on a lot of the new Dritz novels. And it was a little bit hard because we sort of had this big window open, and then it all got, the deals took so long and everything takes so long. We finally started on it. And I mean, I would have liked to have at least another 6 months to work on that book, especially the back half of the book, because the ending comes up pretty quickly. But you know, in hindsight, what can you do? It was a publishing date. This is deadlines. This is what we were talking about with deadlines, and we had to turn it in and get it done. But we would go back and forth. So I would write some, send it to him, and then we'd go back. The chapters go back and forth between a girl named Maggie and a guy named Griffin. And you know, I'd like to say that I wrote Maggie and he wrote Griffin, but we both kind of wrote all of it. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, but he's critiquing you, you're critiquing him. Yeah. Both of you are doing the rewriting.
Well, I don't usually critique him, to be perfectly honest.
Fair enough.
I mean, in the sense that I read his work and I'll be like, okay, for kids or young adults, in this case, it was 13 and up. Although this book does skew a little younger, because it's you know, the whole King Arthur feel of it makes it feel very young. But you know, he picked up pretty quick. You know, he's you know, he's extremely talented, and I wasn't about most of the notes that on both ends that we were giving each other were story driven notes, as opposed to critiquing a word on a page, kind of thing, if that makes sense.
So things like, I want the story to go this way, and if you do that, it can't go this way, or this is just a little.
Like I threw in some seriously dark elements in the first draft, and he was like, "Oh wow, okay," and I was like, "Okay, we don't have to do this. We don't have to do this. We don't have to do this." And so he sort of dialed that back a little bit, and then built up the magic of the worlds, because you know, there's so many worlds, magical worlds now, and finding a way to do something that feels slightly original is not necessarily the easiest task. So for me, I really wanted her to feel a little bit, you know, authentically connected to the moon, and in all forms. And so, because her power comes from the moon, and you know, so we were building a lot of that stuff together. And he would do a great job of, like, you know, poking holes in that, and why is this happening and that not happening. And with Griffin as a character, he's sort of the champion on the decline, falling out of favor with the king, so to speak, and who's got evil and robbing the hinterlands of all of their food and calling it taxes in order to feed his walled city. Is the premise. Yeah, you can tell I wrote it during those crazy political years. So funny. But it was more about Griffin and the fighting styles, and in the ring, in the arena, and then just sort of making sure that there were enough surprises along the way that people didn't guess the story as we get towards the end. He's just, you know, he's a story genius. So,
you know, I would not be a good partner for him, because if I noticed and I saw that most of his sentences didn't have punctuation, I would just assume, you know what, we're not doing punctuation in this book. And I'm wrong. I'm sure he has his reasons.
You know, the one thing that Bob would never do is not put punctuation in if he wasn't doing it on purpose. Like he was so good about finding every typo and fixing every, you know, grammatically speaking, it was way better than I am, because I'm slightly, I have a little bit of a reading disability. So for me, a lot of times I switch words and switch letters in words when I'm typing. So I have to go back through things 5 or 6 times before I can even pass them on to somebody else without feeling like I've, embarrassed myself, but he would catch things and I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry about that, but he was so good about catching everything. He could have been a copy editor.